right, Mashpakhah. So this yom we're looking at Yahusha's death, burial, resurrection, and post-resurrection appearance. That's what we'll be looking at. Post-resurrection appearances. So that's what we'll be looking at this year. So the death of Yahusha on the tree. Detail fulfillments. So impaled on the tree between two transgressors. We're going to look at Yadah Yahuah, or Isaiah 53 verse 12, and Mark 15, looking at verse 27 to 28. When I ask someone to read it for us.
Therefore I give him a portion among the great, and he divides the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his being unto death, and he was counted with the transgressors. And he bore the crime of many, and made intercession for the transgressors.
All right, total for reading, and we're looking at Marcus, or Mark.
(27 to 28).
Card.
And with him they impaled two robbers, one on his right and the other on his left. And the scripture was filled, which says, and he was reckoned with the lawless.
All right, total for reading. So he was numbered with the transgressors. Fulfilled as Yahusha died between two criminals, identify him among the criminals, though he was not guilty. So one of the transgressors repented, asking Yahusha to remember him. This speak of pardon extend even at death, which fulfill Tahal, or Psalms 22 verse 27. So I'm gonna ask someone to read Lucas 23 verse 42, and someone else to read Tahal 22 verse 27. We're gonna connect the scripture to what I just said.
And he said to Yahusha, Adani, remember me when you come into your reign.
Total for reading, and Tahal 22 verse 27.
Let all the ends of the earth remember and turn to Yahuah, and all clans of the nations bow themselves before you.
So we see which This anticipates the turning of the transgressors scattered across the nation back to Yahuwah. All right. So looking at the mockery, the gall, and the vinegar, we're going to look at how our Psalm 69, verse 21, and also look at Yahuah 27, verse 34. Can I ask someone to read it for us?
Psalm 69:21. And they gave me gall for my food, and for my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink.
All right, so that's for reading. And Yahuah 27, verse 34.
They gave him wine mixed with bile to drink, and after tasting he would not drink it.
All right, so that's for reading. So Yahusha was given vinegar mixed with gall. It's a bitter herb or poison. He refused to drink at first, according to Yahuah 27, verse 34. But later he drank vinegar to fulfill scripture. And we can see this, or we're going to look at it in Yochanan, or John 19, verse 28 to 30. Can I ask someone to read it for us?
After this, Yahusha, knowing that all had been accomplished, in order that the scripture might be accomplished, said, I thirst. A bowl of vinegar stood there, and they filled a sponge with vinegar, put it on hyssop, and held it to his mouth. So when Yahusha took the vinegar, he said, It has been accomplished. And bowing his head, he gave up his ruach.
So that for reading. So here we see it illustrate both physical suffering and spiritual bitterness, and highlights his total identification with Israel's suffering and Dawood Mashiach-like lament. So Yahusha being offered a sponge soaked in vinegar, or some may know it as sour wine, while on the tree, is much more than a historical detail. It is a deeply prophetic and symbolic moment, fulfilling multiple layers of the Tanakh. So we're going to look at the fulfillment of prophecy. And the most direct fulfillment is found in Tahal, our Psalm 69, verse 21 that we read a while ago, but we can remind ourselves of it. That they gave me gall for my food, and for my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink. So here we see the Psalm, or Tahal, is widely recognized as being aligned to Mashiach. It speaks of the suffering of the righteous one rejected by his own. So when Yahusha says, I thirst, in John Yochanan 19, verse 28, he does so that the scripture itself might be fulfilled. He is immediately given sour wine on a sponge, This moment confirms he is the suffering servant described in the Psalms or in Tahal, all right, or Talahim. So the vinegar may be seen as a symbol of corruption and suffering. So in Abyb, vinegar is kamatz, the same word for leaven or fermented substance. Now, leaven is often associated with wrongs or corruption. And we're going to take a look at Shamut 12, verse 15. I also want to read it first.
"7 Yomim you shall eat unleavened bread. Indeed, on the first Yom, you cause leaven to cease from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first Yom until the 7th Yom, that being shall be cut off from Yisrael."
Hold on for reading. So Yahusha taught guiltless, though guiltless, willingly drank this bitter, corrupt substance, symbolizing that he was taking up himself the guilt and suffering of Israel. Don't want you to miss that. He was taking up himself so he was taking upon himself the guilt and suffering of Israel. So the use of hyssop is a link to Passover and cleansing. We're going to look back at Yochanan 19, verse 29. We're going to ask someone to read that. And then we're going to head back to Shamut or Exodus 12. This time looking at verse 22. I'm going to ask someone to read that for us. All right, so Yahukanan 19, verse 29. He said, a bowl of sour wine stood there, and they filled a sponge with sour wine, but put it on hyssop and held it to his mouth. So they put the vinegar on hyssop branch. This is significant, very, very significant. And according to Shamut 12, verse 22,
"And you shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the basin, strike the lintel and the 2 doorposts with the blood that is in the basin. And you, none of you shall go out of the door of his house until the Bakar."
bit of a reading. And here we see where the hyssop is used to apply the blood of the Passover lamb to the doorpost. And if we look in Uikara, Leviticus 14, and Numbers, but Bamadabar 19, we see where the hyssop was used in ritual purification. So the hyssop here, we see links Yahusha's death to both Passover and the cleansing of wrongs or crookedness, showing that he is the Lamb who brings redemption and purification. Yadah Yahuah. So gambling for his garments. We're going to look at Tahal, or Psalm 22, verse 18. And we're going to go back to Yahukanan, or John 19, verse 23 to 24.
They divided my garments among them, and for my raiment they cast lots.
Total for reading, and Yahukanan 19, looking at verse 23 to 24.
Then the soldiers, when they had impaled Yahusha, took his outer garments and made 4 parts, to each soldier a part in the inner garment. But the inner garment was without seam, woven from the top in one piece. So they said to each other, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it, whose it shall be, in order that scripture might be fulfilled, which says, They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." The soldiers therefore indeed did this.
Total for reading. So we see here where the Roman soldier divided his outer garments and cast lots for the seamless inner tunic, a precise fulfillment of Talahim or Tahal 22, verse 18. The seamless tunic may enter the high priest's garment, which we can read in Shamut, or Exodus 28, verse 32.
And the opening for his head shall be in the middle of it.
That's 28,
okay.
verse 32.
Right. And the opening for his head shall be in the middle of it, a woven binding all around its opening, like the opening in scaled armor, so that it does not tear.
Total for reading. So here we see Yahusha dying as both the Lamb and the high priest. And we can take a look at Hebrews, or Abarim 9, verse 11 to 12.
But Mashiach, having become a Kohen Hagadol of the coming good, through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of his creation, enter into the Kodesh Mishtah once for all, not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood, having obtained everlasting redemption.
Hold up for reading. So the cry and the root heel up. We're going to take a look at Tahal, or Psalms 31, verse 5. And looking at Luke, or Lucas 23, verse 46.
You said Psalm 23?
31.
Oh, 31.
Verse 5.
In your hand I commit my root. You have redeemed me, O Yahuah, God of truth.
Total for reading and Lucas 23, verse 46.
And crying out with a loud voice, Yahusha said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last.
All right, total for reading. So we see where Yahusha cried, Ab, in your hands I commit my rook. And we see he was quoting from Tahal 31, verse 5. So this declaration reflects trust and surrender and not despair. It tied Yahusha's death into the prayers of Malach Daud, modeling for Israel how to die in righteousness. The earthquake, tombs opened, and the centurion's confession. We're going to take a look at Matthew 27, verse 51 to 54.
And see, the veil of the Mishkan was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth was shaken, and the rocks were split, and the tombs were opened, and many bodies of the Kodashim who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the Kodesh city and appeared to many. And when the captain and those with him who were guarding Yahusha saw the earthquake and all that took place, they feared exceedingly, saying, Truly, this was the Ben of Elohim.
All right. Total for reading. So the earth shook and graves opened, a type of resurrection even at Yahusha's death. So a Roman Gentile soldier confessed, as we see what we just read a while ago, that truly this was the ban of Elohim. So fulfilling the scope of Yahusha or Isaiah 49, verse 6. We are light to the nation. And we're going to read what is said in detail. So Isaiah or Yahusha 49, verse 6.
And he says, Shall it be trivial for you to be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob, and to bring back the preserved ones of Israel? And I shall give you as a light to the nations, to be my deliverance to the ends of the earth.
Toda for reading. So the burial, precision in prophecy. So burial in a new tomb. Looking at Yahusha, Isaiah 53, verse 9. And Yahuah, looking at Yahuah 27, looking at verse 57 to 60. So I'm going to ask someone to read it for us.
And he was appointed a grave with the wicked, and with the rich at his death, because he had done no violence, nor was deceit in his mouth.
All right, total for reading, Matat.
When the evening came, there came a rich man from Ramathaim named Yosef, who himself had also become a Talmid of Yahusha. He went to Pilatus and asked for the body of Yahusha. Then Pilatus commanded the body to be given. And having taken the body, Yosef wrapped it in clean linen and laid it in his new tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock. And he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb and went away.
All right, sort of reading. So, even though he died among criminals, but was buried in a rich man's tomb, fulfilling Yahu with astonishing detail. Can you imagine? He just died and then he was buried in one of those fancy tomb. Wow. A stone roll to seal the tomb. And we're going to look at Daniel 6, verse 17.
And a stone was brought and laid at the mouth of the den, and the sovereign sealed it with his own signet, and with the signets of his great men, that the situation concerning Daniel might not be changed.
All right, so that's read it. And we're going to read Matsah. We're going to read about the verse 60. Yahuah 27. And he said, and it laid it in his new tomb, which he had hewed out of the rock. And he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb and went away. So a great stone was rolled before the entrance of the tomb. So we see the same thing that happened in Daniel 6, verse 17, up in here in Yahuah 27, verse 60. And if we look further down in the same Yahuah, verse 27, verse 66, 27, verse 66, we see where the Romans guards and a seal secure the entrance of the tomb. And we can read verse 66 and see, and he said, and they went and guard the tomb, and sealing the stone, and setting the watch. So this echoes Daniel in the lion's den. A stone sealed the entrance, and Daniel came out alive. A prophetic type of resurrection. So the Shabbat rests in the tomb. Yahusha's body rests on the Shabbat, fulfilling the principle of Shabbat rest in death. And we can look at Shamut 20, verse 10. Exodus 20, verse 10.
But the seventh year is a Shabath of Yahuah Yeranaim. You do not do any work, you nor your ban, nor your bath, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates.
So his rest symbolized both completion of the redemptive work and anticipation of the greater resurrection rest for all Israel. Yadah Yahuah. So we're looking at the resurrection and the fulfillment and first fruits. So the Malach rolled the stone away. Looking at Matthieu 28, verse 2.
And see, there was a great earthquake, For a messenger of Yahuwah came down out of the Shemayim, and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it.
To them for reading. So a heavenly messenger came and rolled back the stone. Not to let Yahusha out. We are not told that it was at that moment or at that time he was able to walk out. But to let the witnesses in. So this demonstrates resurrection power from Yahuwah and not man. It also signals divine removal of obstruction. And we're going to take a look of Yahusha Bannon 5 verse 9.
And Yahuwah said to Yahushua, or Yahusha ben Nun, this yom I have rolled away the reproach of Matsarim from you. So the name of the place is called Gilgal to this yom.
So then for reading. So here we see Yahusha Bannon signaling the removal of obstruction. So this action also fulfills Tahal or Psalms 24 verse 7 to 9. We're going to look at that Psalm or Tahal 24 verse 7 to 9.
Lift up your heads, O you gates, and be lifted up, you everlasting doors. Am I reading the correct thing?
Correct.
Okay. And let the sovereign of esteem come in. Who is this sovereign of esteem? Yahuwah strong and mighty, Yahuwah mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O you gates, and even lift up, you everlasting doors, and let the sovereign of esteem come in.
So for reading. So we also covered other representation in our presentation on is burial. So sitting signifies authority and completion in Hebraic thought. So looking at Tahal or Psalm 110 verse 1. Next I want to read it for us.
Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet.
All right, total for reading. So the Malak sitting on the stone demonstrate that death and the grave had been conquered. The Malak could have left, but there had to be a heavenly witness and earthly witness of this Bashura. And we're going to take a look at the Barim, or 19, verse 15.
One witness does not rise up against a man concerning any wickedness or any crime that he commits. At the mouth of 2 witnesses, or at the mouth of 3 witnesses, a matter is established.
All right, total for reading. And also gonna ask you to read Yahuah 28 verse 5 to 7.
And the messenger responding said to the woman, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Yahusha, who was impaled. He is not here, for he was raised. As he said, come, see the place where the Adani lay." Verse 7.
Verse 7.
And go quickly, say to his taught ones that he was raised from the dead, and see, he is going before you to Galilee.
Total for read.
There you shall see him.
See,
I have told you.
Total for reading. So the messenger also had to greet and instruct the earthly witnesses. Just to want to clear or clarify something. So when I said we covered this in the presentation on this burial, it was from yesterday Shabbat lesson. So the woman witnesses and the new creation. Looking at Lucas or Luke 24, reading from 1 to 10. I'm going to ask someone to read it for us.
And on one of the Shabbaths, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared. And they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. And having entered, they did not find the body of Yadah Yahuah. And it came to be, as they were perplexed about this, that see, 2 men stood by them in glittering garments. And becoming frightened and bowing their faces to the earth, they said to them, "Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, but he has been raised up. Remember how he had spoke to you when he was still in Galilee, saying, the Ben of Adam has to be delivered into the hands of sinners and be impaled, and the 3rd day rise again." And they remembered his words. And having returned from the tomb, they reported all this to the 11 and to all the rest. And it was Miriam from Magdala, and Johanan, and Miriam of Jacob, and the rest of them who told this to the emissaries.
All right, total for reading. So we see where women were the first witnesses. A legal impossibility in man's court, but intentional by Yahuah. They were loyal, watchful, and present. These are qualities Yahuah honors. If you observe that in this redemptive plan, the women were the first to witness and proclaim the resurrection, a type of restoration, having been the first in the garden to be deceived. It was the first Yom of the week, symbolizing renewed creation, just like in Bereshit or in Genesis. Miriam mistook him for a gardener, a direct literary echo of Adam in the garden. So Yahusha is the second Adam in renew Adan, or renew Eden. So do not hold on to me. We're going to look at Yahuwah or John 20, verse 17.
Yahusha said to her, do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to Abyb, or my father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to Abyb and your father, and to my Alaim and your Alaim.
All right. Total for reading. So when Yahusha mentioned this to Miriam, not to cling, for I have not yet ascended to Abyb, or my father. If we look on it from a Hebraic context, on a first fruit, on first fruits, the Omer of barley was weighed before Yahuwah as the first offering of the harvest. And we can look to references to Uikara or Leviticus 23, verse 10 to 14. Then I also want to read for us.
Speak to the children of Yasharah, and you shall say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, and shall reap its harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the Kohen. And he shall wave the sheaf before Yahuwah for your acceptance. On the morrow after the Shabbat, the Kohen waves it. On that day, when you wave the sheaf, you shall prepare a male lamb, a year old, a perfect one, as a burnt offering to Yahuwah, and its grain offering, 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, an offering made by fire to Yahuwah, a sweet fragrance, and to its drink offering 1/4 of a hind of wine. And you do not eat bread or roasted grain or fresh grain until the same day that you have brought an offering to your Elohim, a law forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings.
All right, total for reading. So we see where Yahusha and Omar. So Yahusha, the Omar Rashid, for our first sheaf, had to be presented undefiled to Yahuwah before being handled. So the word Rashid, and where you see the T at the end, there should be no T. That was a typo error. So he fulfilled the role of the first fruit offering. So the appearance to the thought ones, according to Yochanan, John 20, looking at verse 19 to 29. Can I ask someone to read it for us?
When therefore it was evening on that Yom, one of the Shabbathoth, And when the doors were shut where the taught ones met, for fear of the Yahudim, Yahusha came and stood in the midst and said to them, Shalom Lachem, or peace to you. And having said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The taught ones therefore rejoiced when they saw the Adani. Then Yahusha said to them again, Shalom Lachem, peace to you. As the Father has sent me, I also send you. And having said this, he breathed on them and said to them, receive the Ruach HaKadosh. If you forgive the wrongs of any, they are forgiven them. If you retain the wrongs of any, they have been retained. But Uma, called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Yahusha came. So the other taught one said to him, we have seen the Adani. But he said to them, unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and put my finger into the imprint of the nails, and put my hand in his side, I shall by no means believe. And after 8 Yumim, his taught ones were again inside, and Tuma with them. Yahusha came, the doors having been shut, and he stood in the midst and said, Shalom Lachem, or peace to you. Then he said to Tuma, bring your finger here, and see my hands, and bring your hand and put it in my side, into my side, and do not be unbelieving, but believing. And Tuma answered and said to him, Adani, my Elohim. Yahusha said to him, Tuma, because you have seen me, you have believed. Baruk are those who have not seen and have believed.
So for reading. So he appeared in a locked room and showing a transformed, resurrected body. He breathed on them, echoing Barashita Genesis 2 verse 7, a new breath of life and a new creation. So for 40 Yomim, or teaching the rain, and we can look at Mahasim, or Acts 1 verse 3.
Two, he also presented himself alive after his suffering by many infallible proofs, being seen by them for 40 days, speaking concerning the reign of Elohim.
All right, total for reading. So Yahusha spent 40 Yomim with the taught ones, teaching them about the reign of Elohim. So 40 is a number of testing, transition, and preparation. From the times of Matsah, Moses, on Mount Sinai to Israel in the wilderness. So it connects to the renewal of covenant in preparation for Shabath, or Feast of Weeks, or some may commonly know it as Pentecost, and the outpouring giving of the Ruach of Yahuah, echoing the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. So we can In your spare time, you can look at Acts scene 2. So the post-resurrection appearances. So let's unpack the post-resurrection appearances of Yahusha, focusing on the emotional and spiritual heart condition of each thought one and how Yahusha personally and uniquely restored them. So we're going to look at Miriam Magdalene. From grief and confusion to recognition and commission. So looking at her heart condition, it was deep sorrow, confusion, and loss. So she had been delivered from 7 shady or Shadim. We can look at Lucas 8, verse 2.
And certain women were healed of wicked or rational food and sicknesses. Miriam called from Magdala, out of whom had come 7 Shadim.
All right, so here we see the scriptural line to what I just said, that she was delivered from 7 Shadim and was deeply attached to Yahusha as her redeemer. So at the tomb, she was weeping, thinking someone has stolen his body. And as we can look at Yochanan 20, looking at verse 11 to 13.
But Miriam was standing outside of the tomb weeping. Then as she wept, she stooped down to the tomb and saw 2 messengers in white sitting, one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Yahusha had been laid. And they said to her, "Woman, why do you weep?" She said to them, "Because they took away Adonai, and I don't know where they have laid him."
For reading. So we have to understand that the connection that she had with Yahusha was really deep. So she was going back just to check on it and to find out that his body was missing. She would have been frustrated. Um, our are weeping. Sorry, she was weeping because his body went missing, and we know the level of connection that they had from the time that she was delivered from the 7 Shadim, and she became attached to Yahusha. So what did Yahusha did to bring a level of restoration to her? And we can look further down in the same Yochanan 20. We're going to look at verse 16 to 17.
Yahusha said to her, Miriam. She turned and said to him, Teacher. Yahusha said to her, Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father or Abyb. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my Elohim and your Elohim.
All right, total for reading. So we see Yahusha calling out to Miriam. And this is a tender and deeply personal moment. All right, let me apologize to you for that. So we see here Yahusha calls her by her name. So this is a tender, deeply personal moment. And we see where it's fulfilling Yadah Yahuah 43, verse 1.
But now, thus says Yahuwah, your creator, Jacob, and he who formed you, Yasharal. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine.
For reading. So Yahusha tells her, Go to my brothers. He commissioned her, restoring her identity and giving her the honor of being the first sent one, a true emissary. So emotionally, he turns her mourning into dancing. And we can look at Tahal, or Psalms 30, verse 11.
You have turned my mourning into dancing for me.
Hold on, for reading. Continue.
You have torn off my sackcloth and girded me with gladness.
Hold on, for reading. So looking at Kapha, or the same one we call Peter, from shame and failure to affirmation and recommissioning. So the heart condition, guilt and shame after denying Yahusha 3 times. And we can look at Luke 22, verse 61 to 62.
And the Adon turned and looked at Kepha, and Kepha remembered the word of the Adon, how he had said to him, Before a cock crows, you shall deny me 3 times. And Kepha went out and wept bitterly.
All right, for reading. So though he ran to the tomb, he did not see Yahusha initially. We can look at chapter Lucas 22, verse 12.
But Kepha arose and ran to the tomb, and stooping down, he saw the linen wrappings lying by themselves. And he went away home marveling at what took place.
All right, Toda. So likely felt disqualified from leadership or close fellowship. Restoration. Yahusha meets Kaffa one-on-one before the others. And we can look at the same scripture, looking at verse 34. I'm going to ask someone to, in the meanwhile, look at Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 15, verse 5.
Saying, the Adon has truly raised and has appeared to Shimon.
All right. And 1 Corinthians 15, verse 5.
And that he was seen by Kepha, then by the 12.
All right, Toda. So both accounts we see shows a private restoration, not fully detailed, but essential. So Yahusha meets Kaffa one-on-one in both accounts. So later at the Sea of Galilee, he gives Kaffa a threefold opportunity to affirm love. And we can look at Yochanan or John 21, verse 15 to 17.
When, therefore, they had eaten breakfast, Yahusha said to Shimon Kepha, Shimon of Yonah, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Adonai, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him again, the second time, Simon of Yonah, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Adonai, you know that I love you. He said to him, shepherd my sheep. He said to him the third time, Shimon of Yonah, do you love me? Kepha was sad because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Adonai, you know all. You know that I love you. Yahusha said to him, feed my sheep.
All right, Toda for reading. Toda for reading. So we see 3 times Yahusha asks him, and each time Yahusha asks him is one for each time that Kaffa denied Yahusha. So Yahusha doesn't only restore Kaffa, he entrusts him with his sheep. He first feeds him with both physical and spiritual food, then commissions him to feed his sheep. So fulfillment of Micah 7 verse 19. This meeting at the location of the sea and Kaffa restoration there was intentional. So we're going to look at Micah 7 verse 19.
He shall turn back. He shall have compassion on us. He shall trample upon our crookedness, and you throw all our wrongs into the depths of the sea.
Read it one more time.
He shall turn back. He shall have compassion on us. He shall trample upon our crookedness, and you throw all our wrongs into the depths of the sea.
Oh, total for reading. Total for reading. All right. So the 7 taught ones at the sea. And we're going to look at Yochanan 21 verse 1 to 12. From the emptiness to fullness. I'm going to ask someone to read it for us again.
After this, Yahusha manifested himself again to the Talmidim at the Sea of Kinnereth, and he manifested this way. Shalum Mashpakhah and Tooma called the twin, and Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, of Zebediah, and 2 others of his Talmidim were together. Simon Kapha said to them, I am going to fish. They said to him, we're also coming with you. They went out and immediately entered into the boat, and that night they caught none at all. But when it became early morning, Yahusha stood on the beach. However, the Talmidim did not know that it was Yahusha. Then Yahusha said to them, children, have you any food? They said to him, no. And he said to them, throw the nets on the right side of the boat, and you shall find. So they threw, and they were no longer able to draw it in because of the large number of fish. That Talmud, whom Yahusha loved, then said to Kapha, it is the Adon. Then Shimon Kapha, hearing that it was the Adon, put on his outer garment, for he was stripped, and plunged into the sea. And the other Talmidim came into the little boat, for they were not far from the land, but about 200 pukon, dragging a net with the fish. And when they had come to the land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fish laid on it, and bread. Yahusha said to them, bring some of the fish which you have now caught. Shimon Kapha went up and dragged the net to land, filled with 153 big fish. And though there were so many, the net was not broken. Yahusha said to them, come, have breakfast. And not one of the Talmidim had the courage to ask him, who are you? Knowing that it was the Adon.
All right. Toda for reading. So the heart condition. So these taught ones, including Kapha, go back to fishing, possibly regressing to their former lives. They fish all lila or all night, and they catch nothing. And this symbol of spiritual emptiness and futility apart from Yahusha. So looking at the restoration, Yahusha stands on the shore at dawn, a picture of new beginnings. He instructs them to cast a net on the right side, leading to a miraculous catch, which amount to 153 fish, and restoring their fruitfulness. He feeds them breakfast, echoing Tahal or Tahalaim or Psalm 23, verse 5.
You spread before me a table in the face of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over.
Hold on, read it. So we see Yahusha reminds them that the abundance flow from obedience and abiding in him. So when they had obey Yahusha and throw the net on the right side, we see where that symbolizes or reminds them that the abundance flows from obedience and abiding in him, in Yahusha. So the two taught ones on the road to Emmaus, from disappointment to burning revelation. So the hard condition, the disillusionment and disappointment. And we're going to look at Lucas 24, verse 21.
We, however, were expecting that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. But besides all this, it's the third Yom since these took place.
So the for reading. So they were walking away from Jerusalem, symbolically walking away from the promise. Now, the restoration, Yahusha joins them in their journey, hiding his identity at first. Their hearts had to be first be ready before their eyes were open. So he opens the scripture to them, and not with miracles, but with the word. And when we take a look further down in the same chapter, looking at verse 30 to 31, that's Lucas 24, verse 30 to 31. And I'm gonna ask someone to read it for us.
And it came to be, when he sat at the table with them, having taken the bread, he baruk, and having broken, he was giving it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight.
All right, total for reading. So, as he break bread, their eyes were open. And this is both a spiritual and a literal meaning. Did not our hearts burn with us? Their cold belief was rekindled when all of that happened. They run back to Jerusalem that same hour and restore to the community and mission. So the 10 taught ones in the locked room. Looking at Zaqan 20, verse 19 to 23. From fear to peace and purpose. Can I ask someone to read for us?
And therefore it was evening that day, one of the Shabbats, and when the door was shut where the Talmudim met, for fear of the Yahudim, Yahusha came and stood in the midst and said to them, Peace to you. And having said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The Talmudim therefore rejoiced when they saw the Adon. And Yahusha said to them again, Peace to you. As the Father has sent me, I also sent you. And having said this, he breathed on them and said to them, Receive the Ruach HaKodesh. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they have been retained.
All right. total for reading. So their heart condition. So they're paralyzed by fear of the Yahudit authorities, likely feeling abandoned, confused, and uncertain about the future. So when Yahusha appears, this is the restoration take place. And speaking, Yahusha said, Shalom Lakam, which we see where it means peace unto you. He shows his wounds, affirming it is truly him and confirming his suffering was part of the plan. And if we look in our spare time reading Yadah Yahuah or Isaiah 53, we can see this coming out. So he breathes on them, a direct echo of Bereshit or Genesis 2, verse 7 that we read earlier, which giving new Kai. So he commissioned them and he restores their courage, giving them the rule and a new mandate. So looking at Puma, or some may know as Thomas. Puma is often labeled doubting Thomas because of what we read or see in Yochanan 20, verse 25. I'm going to ask someone to read it for us.
So the other Talmudim said to him, "We have seen the Adon." But he said to them, unless I see the Adon, unless I see his hands, the mark of the nails, and put my finger into the prints of the nails, and put my hand into the side, I shall by no means believe.
All right, total for reading. So, but this was not necessary intellectual doubt. It reflects a heart struggling with grief and exclusion and possible shame. Thomas wasn't simply doubting, he was discouraged, wounded, and likely feeling left behind. And we can put Thomas into our current, well, in my perspective that I've experienced. When my father passed away, I knew I felt discouraged and I felt grieved and I felt to stay by myself. So we can see where Thomas would have felt the same, knowing that he had a relationship with Yahusha and knowing that he died and probably thinking that he never coming back. So he would have felt discouraged and want to exclude himself from everyone. So we know Thomas was a simple doubting. He, as I said earlier, he was discouraged, wounded, and like a feel left behind. So why was Thomas not with the others? When we can look in Yochanan 20, verse 19 to 23, where we see Yahusha appears to other disciples when Thomas is not with them. So this detail is crucial. It suggests Thomas had separated himself, maybe isolated due to the deep emotional pain or disillusionment. So he might have felt abandoned or unworthy, or he was struggling with guilt for not doing more. So like many times of trauma, he may have chosen to isolate or solitude, choose to solitude instead of community. So there are many in the community of Israel now who feel the same way and choose to isolate themselves because they are broken. So Tuma's words reveal longing and not rebellion. Tuma didn't say he is risen. He isn't risen. He said, unless I see, I will not believe. So that's a cry of someone who wants to believe but feels left out of the encounter. It was like saying, why did he appear to you and not me? Do I matter less? So it echoes the psalmist's honest lament. And we can look at Tahal, or Psalm 77, verse 7 to 9. And also we can look at Mashalim, or Proverbs 17, verse 22. Also looking at chapter 15, verse 13, and chapter 13, verse 12.
Would Yahuah reject forever and never again be pleased? Has his kindness ceased forever? Has the promise failed for all generations? Has all forgotten to show favor? Has he shut up his compassion in displeasure? Salah.
Salah. And Mashalim 17, verse 22.
A rejoicing heart causes good healing, but a stricken spirit dries the bones.
Toda. And 15, chapter 15, verse 13.
A glad heart makes good a face, but sorrow of heart, the spirit is stricken.
And 13, verse 12.
Expectancy drawn out makes the heart sick, but a longing comes true is a tree of high.
Toda for reading. So Yahusha responds, compassion, not rebuke. So when Yahusha appears again, what does he say? And we can look what he said in Yahuchanan 20, verse 27.
Then he said to Toma, bring your finger here and see my hands. Bring your hand and put it into my side. Do not be unbelieving, but believing.
Toda for reading. So, but there's no anger or shame in his word. It's personal and restorative. He met Toma in his discouragement. So this is consistent with Yeshayahu 42 verse 3, where Yahusha restores the discouraged by invitation and not condemnation. So we're going to ask someone to read Yeshayahu 42 verse 3.
A crushed reed he does not break, and smoking flax he does not quench. He brings forth right ruling in accordance with truth.
Toda for reading. So we know Yahusha restores the discouraged by invitation and not condemnation. So Thomas' confession, the most profound in the Bashura. So after being restored, Thomas responds, according to Yahuah 20 verse 28. So he's the first of the taught ones or followers in the Bashur to explicitly declare Yahusha both master and Elohim. We're gonna look at the verse in Yahuah John 20 verse 28.
And Tomo answered and said to him, Adonai and my Elohim.
So the one who was most discouraged ended up giving the greatest declaration of belief. His journey shows that Yahuwah honors honest hearts even when bruised. Yadah Yahuah. The Toma, the courageous, and not the doubter. So in Yahuah 11, verse 16, we read earlier, you see where Toma is the one who says, let us also go that we may die with him. He was loyal. All right, can someone read Yahuah 11, verse 16? For me, please.
Toma, who was called the twin, then said to his fellow Talmudim, let us also go so that we could die with him.
All right. Hold on. So, as I was saying, he was loyal, brave, and when broken, Yahusha restored him personally. Restored him personally. So Toma is not the example of weak belief, but of a true believer who wrestled, was broken, and thereafter restored. So Yahusha's death, burial, and resurrection were not incidental. They were divinely appointed, unfolding with surgical precision. So every psalm, every type, every moedim, from lambs to stones to gardens, pointed to him. His work reversed Adon, fulfilled the departure or exodus, and initiate the renewed covenant prophesied in Yirmiyahu 31, verse 31 to 33, and Zakal 36, verse 26 to 27. We're gonna look at both scripture. Gonna ask someone to read Yirmiyahu or Jeremiah 31, verse 31 to 33, and Zakal or Ezekiel 36, verse 26 to 27.
See, the Yumim are coming, declares Yahuah, when I shall make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Yehudah, not like the covenant I made with their fathers in the day or in the Yom, when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Natsarymof, my covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, declares Yahuah. For this is the covenant I shall make with the house of Israel after those Yumim, declares Yahuah. I shall put my Torah in their inward parts and write it on their hearts, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people.
All right, Torah, Zaqan 36, verse 26 to 27.
And I shall give you a new heart, and put a new spirit within you. And I shall take the heart of stone out of your flesh, and I shall give you a heart of flesh, and put my ruach within you. And I shall cause you to walk in my laws, and guard my right rulings, and shall do them.
All right, turn off for reading. So his Kai, or his life, seemed the Tanakh together, making it whole. As he said, these are the words which I spoke unto you, that all things must be fulfilled. And this is according to Lucas 24, verse 44.